Man, this thing is super cool. And I would be saying that even if I went out and spent my own money on it, as opposed to being provided the sample for review. And full disclosure, this knife was provided to me by Schrade in exchange for a fair and honest review, and that's exactly what I'm giving you here. This is my review of the Schrade Beta Series Infiltrate, and this is a damn cool knife. Okay? That being said, while it was provided to me for free in exchange for that review, it is still my own opinions. I have not been paid for this. Nobody has ever tried to tell me what I have to say about a knife in order to review it. A couple of companies have tried to rush review timing. I've declined them as a result of that attempted rush. But Schrade is very willing to let me just say what I have to say in whatever timely manner I'm able to get to it. And in the case of this knife, which is I've been carrying as a purpose-built self-defense weapon, which I've thankfully not had to use, I already have all the carry data that I need in order to review it. Okay, because this is not a utility knife. This is not an EDC knife. This isn't something that you go out and cut cardboard boxes and clamshell packages with. Can you do it? Sure. It's not really designed for that. There's better knives for that. This is purpose-built as a combat knife, a folding defensive weapon. Okay, and thank God I haven't had to actually use it in that role. That said, I've carried it enough to get a feel for how it carries in the pocket, some of the quirks about it, some of the cool design features, what I think could improve it, so on and so forth. If you're curious about the edge retention of Schrade's D2, because this is a D2 blade, go look at my reviews of the Schrade Alchemist and the Schrade Slyte. I've used their D2 and I talk about it in those videos. Basically, it is perfectly solid D2 steel. Okay, it holds a pretty good edge. It does need to be oiled to keep it from rusting. It's not hard to sharpen, and it takes a pretty decent edge. It functions about like you'd expect D2 to function. A quick note about the Beta series from Schrade is, for those who don't know, Schrade has 3 primary series under the traditional Schrade brand. They also have their Uncle Henry and Old Timer brands and all sorts of stuff. But under the Schrade brand, you have the Delta series, which are overseas made knives made using overseas materials. Okay, so those are made in China, Taiwan, so on and so forth, and they use steels from those countries. The Beta series are USA made and assembled knives, but they'll use components from foreign countries. So, for example, this is a Beta knife. It is made in the United States. It's assembled here, but parts of the knife could be made over in China, over in Taiwan, over anywhere else overseas, over in Japan, shipped over here, and then put on the knife once it reaches America. So the D2 blade on this, it could be American D2. More than likely, it is an imported Chinese D2. Okay? I don't know for sure. It's just a guess based on price. That seems realistic. And then you have the Alpha series, which is 100% USA made out of 100% US components. So 3 different price levels, 3 different levels of production quality, quote unquote, as far as country of origin goes. I know a lot of people out there who only want USA made knives, and these Beta class knives do fit that role. So this is a Beta class knife. Now keep that in mind whenever we talk about its cost, because this is very affordable for being US built. Okay, but the D2, like I said, it functions just fine. You can see here this blade, it's 3 3/4 inches long, and it is a folding dagger, kind of. Okay, what I mean by kind of is the front section is sharpened, but the back swedge is not. And I think that Schrade does this primarily for legality reasons. If they sharpen that back swedge, there's a significantly lower number of states that you can legally carry this knife in, because double-edged knives are still illegal in more states than not. That said, the back of the spine is thin enough that it wouldn't take much grinding to sharpen that up and make this a true folding dagger. And I think that's what I'm going to end up doing with this, because that's the coolest part of the design for me, is being a folding dagger. All right, but not sharp on the back section. It is sharp on the front. You see we have a small run of serrations, which is my first real criticism of this knife. I don't like serrations on a defensive weapon. I really don't. And this is going to get graphic, but if we're talking about this as a self-defense knife, then these can actually become problematic. They're good for utility knives, although I don't like the serration pattern even for utility. I'll demonstrate how they cut here in a moment. But they're good for utility knives, but they're honestly a detriment to a defensive blade, in my opinion. Because if we are in a situation where we're having to use this knife to defend ourselves, given the blade shape especially, this is a thrusting weapon. Say you are now making the thrust and you penetrate onto the target or into the target. Okay, these serrations can potentially bind up in their clothing, in their flesh, the sinew of it all. It's graphic information, but it can bind up. Okay, and now, yeah, we're doing more damage as we extract the knife because it's ripping through all of that as we're coming out. But it can also cause the knife to bind up and cost us critical seconds that we don't want to waste. Now, this is all very unlikely. I'd say 999 out of 1,000 people that buy this knife will not have to use it in a combat role. But that's what it's designed for. And in those type of scenarios, every single second could matter, especially if our opponent also has their own blade. We make the thrust, yes, we connect, we do damage, but now we're struggling to remove the blade, and that gives them time to cause us harm. Okay, so I don't like the serrations on this knife. I don't think they fit the self-defense function of the knife, the combat function of the design. Do they cut? Well, here's some nylon rope. Okay, we're going to go ahead and test these serrations on this. I'm struggling to cut through it. And it's not because they aren't sharp. Part of this is the tripod, admittedly. Having to work around the tripod. And I'm knocking off all my review information and all that. If I reposition this, I can get a little bit of a better cut, I think. But you're seeing that it is tearing a bit, and that's because the serration pattern isn't ideal. Make sure I'm in the serrations. Okay, there we go. Took quite a bit of force, though. So, do they work? I mean, yeah. But as you can clearly see, not all that well. Let me roll up my rope here. I'm going to try to use this for more reviews where I review serrated knives, just so I can show you how good the serration design is. But they do kind of work, but I'm not a fan of the serration pattern, even on a utility knife. Okay, the cuts, the crescent cuts are much deeper in the blade than our fine edge section, and then these teeth are very jagged and raised in comparison to those crescents. And what that results in is even when these serrations are sharpened, and they are, we cause bind up, and we can tear more than we can cut. Okay, now think about that. That was just on rope that I was attempting to cut. Now imagine this is penetrated into something, okay, without being too graphic, and now you're trying to extract it, and the fabric of the clothing or the flesh is binding up in those serrations. You can see how it might be difficult to extract. Okay, so I'm not a fan of that. The overall blade length, though, and design is great for self-defense. We don't have a lot of belly. It's not meant to be a cutting knife, although we do have a nice razor-sharp edge out of the box. But we have a very, very penetrative tip that would make short work of whatever we're thrusting into. That being said, it's also delicate, so keep in mind, if you miss that thrust and contact into a harder media like concrete, cement, hard wood, whatever, you could bust that tip off. How does the knife function for utility? Poorly. It's not designed for it. I mean, it'll open your Amazon boxes. You can probably slice your steak with it just fine. It'll work for a lot of basic stuff. But there's far better everyday carry shapes out there than this. That's not what it's for. Again, this is a folding combat knife. Okay? And if you sharpen that back swedge, you'd have an even more functional folding combat knife, as it'll increase our penetrative thrust capability, but also, while it's not a great slashing weapon, having more versatility to cut with that front edge or that back edge, I think would be quite helpful. All right, deployment and lockup, you see it as a flipper design, and it is a back flipper specifically. We can use the front protrusion kind of like a thumb stud. I mean, we can do it. It's not very intuitive. It's not really designed for it. That section is there to be designed as a guard, but the flipper works really, really well. Okay, you see it comes out super fast, doesn't require any wrist action. The ball detent is perfect on this. The flipper itself is jimped for great traction, good purchase on the flipper, and it locks up tight. I have no place side to side or up and down, and we could adjust it at the dual-sided pivot point if we needed to. Likewise, the centering is pretty much spot on, maybe slightly to the right-hand side, but not enough to worry about. I'd say it's pretty much perfect, and we could also adjust that if need be. A liner lock design with a nice early engagement. I love to see that. It is riding on a ball bearing pivot system, which is part of why it is so smooth. Okay, and it is. It's very smooth. Now, a couple things I want to note. I think this ramp should be jimped. Not just on this back side, but also on the front side. Because the front of this ramp right here, you see, is what comes down and angles out of the front of the knife. And the reason why I want that jimped is for better traction on both sides. on this side for when we're holding it, because that ramp is begging for some jimping. But on the front side, if we had that jimped, this would become a waveable knife. And it already is, by the way, in carrying and using this. I have been able to wave this off the pocket because it is tip up. So whenever we're extracting it, we're pulling this tab towards the seam of our pants. It catches and, you know, brings the knife out. That said, because it isn't textured in any shape, way, or form, it doesn't always grab the pocket and it can just slip off. If they had jimped this, then we have a little more extra traction on the seam of our pant pocket, and we'd have a more consistent wave feature. I don't know if Schrade was aiming for that, but it's certainly already built into the design with just minimal additions needed to really maximize the capability. So I would like to see that change made. Okay, but like I mentioned, that ramp there is begging for jimping. As it is, we have a pretty good grip on the knife. The handle is made out of micarta, 5 inches long, so good real estate, and provides pretty adequate traction. Even better traction whenever wet, as micarta often does. We have a good grip, but we could have better grip. Okay, that front side does kind of flare up to become a small guard. Better than nothing on a folding knife. I like the handle a lot, with a caveat, and that caveat is the transitions on the edges are a little sharp. Okay, it's a little boxy. It's not uncomfortable. It doesn't cut into me, but it doesn't melt in the hand either. And it very easily could if they had radiused these micarta scales just a little bit more. Okay, small criticism, but a criticism nonetheless. I want to be honest and fair here. That is something I would like to see. Okay, I already mentioned the liner lock. It's well jimped. There's our timing. The liner also does protrude a little bit to make it really easy to access. Okay, there's no issues whatsoever of disengaging this liner lock, which I love to see. The weight on this knife, I have it written down as exactly 4 ounces. Let's break out our drug dealer scale and slap this bad boy on here. Boom, 4 ounces flat. So very carryable. Remember, this is a 5-inch handle, a 3 3/4 inch blade. That's a pretty good weight. It is only for right-hand tip-up carry, which is a little unfortunate. I would like to see this side tapped so we could also, you know, make it available for lefties. I don't see why that's not already done. It wouldn't be too much extra cost. But that said, the clip design is a simple loop over. It buries almost completely into the pocket. We have a little to extract it with. It doesn't flare up towards the end there, so it's not likely to snag on things. And we don't have any mushroom capping on those screw heads. I love to see it. Okay, a great design pocket clip. Although mine could use just a little more tension. This is one of those things that is going to vary from knife to knife. There are going to be some that are just like mine, some that are weaker than mine, and some that are way stronger than mine. I've seen pocket clip issues like this on Spyderco's, Benchmade's, Kershaw's. It's not just a thing that Schrade will be dealing with, but I notice it on this particular knife, so I want to mention it. Mine clip tension is slightly weak. It's not flimsy, but I'd like to see it a little bit stronger. Okay, that said, I'll show you how it carries on the old cutlery lever pocket. See, it carries quite well. It buries deeply. We have just enough to extract it with. I think that's a good design. I know a lot of people are diehard on the complete deep conceal. I get it. I've lost a few knives, and I've grown to like deep carry clips more than I used to as a result. But I still like having a little bit to extract it with, especially on a self-defense knife. And I'm not alone in that. The only competitive option I'm going to show you is also a reference point. This is a dedicated fighting knife for a folding design, and you can see that they give us a lot of knife protruding from the pocket. Okay, this is a Dragon Nails Brambui variation of the Lapu Lapu Corto by Bram Franck. Dedicated folding fighting knife, and it's going to help me kind of talk about the next point of this. I like that this is a folding combat knife that doesn't require specialized training. Okay, it's very straightforward. You stick them with the pointy end. All right, it works well. I mean, it can be used in a variety of ways. We can hold it in whatever grip and use that glass breaker as a skull crusher, making contact with someone's thigh, someone's rib cage, or if we're going more lethal, someone's temple, and it would work quite effectively at that. You could also, of course, deploy the knife and use it as a thrusting weapon, a slashing weapon. That's what it's designed for, is a thrusting weapon. You could probably hold it back here and whack somebody with those protrusions, making contact to their knuckles and causing some serious pain, causing them to release their grip. There's ways you could use this beyond just sticking them with the pointy end, but it's very straightforward in its approach. Many folding combat knives, like this Brambui, are designed with very specific fighting styles in mind that require specialized training. Okay, this is a Filipino martial arts folding knife, and no, I'm not super well versed in how to use it, but I have looked at some of the information online, and you know, it's all about, before even opening the knife, we're striking with this, we're irritating someone's skin by dragging this jimping across it. We have our pointed areas for high contact for an impact weapon, and then as a last ditch, we deploy the knife. The curved handle helps to facilitate the cut, so on and so forth. Okay, very Count Dooku on that aspect of it. It's a very functional weapon. It's a very functional fighting knife, but it requires very specific training into the Filipino martial arts to use it properly. This, Okay, even if you know very little about knife fighting, you understand this end, lethal, this end, less lethal, stop the bad guy. And I love that about the knife. Okay, no hate to this knife. I'll do a full review on this at some point. But I like the simplicity because it is very functional, very straightforward, very non-gimmicky. I appreciate that and enjoy that. It is a full flow-through design, by the way, so it is very easy to clean out. No skeletonizing on those stainless steel liners, but it's already light enough. I'm not really worried about that, even though we could shave a little bit of weight off if we did skeletonize them. Price point. Let's talk about this for this USA-made knife. Retail is about $100. Blade HQ, I think, is like $75 or $79. Amazon has these for $65. $65 for an American-made D2 blade Micarta handle folding dagger. That is a hell of a price. I mean, what's the competition for something like this? I know Boker Plus has a couple of knives, the Ice Pick, and then there's one other that are kind of similar. Those are both over $100. The Gerber Applegate Fairbairn folding dagger, folding version of the Fairbairn Sykes Combat Dagger. I think those are $150 to $180 these days. Meanwhile, again, this one, $65 on Amazon as of the time of this video, about $75 to $80 standard retail for an American-produced and at least partially American-made folding dagger. That is a hell of a deal. Okay, so if you don't want to support the Chinese knife industry, again, this has stuff that is produced over there that are on the knife. I'm not going to say it doesn't. Schrade admits as much, but it's still U.S. built. Okay, so you can carry it in your pride or in your pocket with some pride, if that is a thing that you care about. And I feel like a lot of you probably will. It's a very cool knife. I enjoy it. I'll probably sharpen that back section. Or my buddy Nick is a prison guard, and he actually really likes this thing. He really wants it. I don't know if he's allowed to carry it at work or not, but he's a big knife guy as well. This may end up being a Christmas present or something to him. Super cool knife. I really enjoy it. I really recommend it. Small changes I would make, like I mentioned, the jimping where I said it would be, make that a plain edge, radius these handles a little more, and tap it for left-hand carry. But overall, it's a fantastic knife. Good job, Schrade.